Hello, Shannon. Welcome. Thank you for your time. Apologies for the frantic mess that I am. I take full responsibility for the nonsense at the start of this podcast, but welcome. Thank you. Where are you speaking from today?
I'm actually in California right now.
Are you? I thought Bali. I don't know why I had Bali down. You were
No,
previous.
because I based there as well, but we're also all over the place. So you don't need to apologize for anything.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
physically, not mentally. I'm mentally all over the place. Hence the self-stigmatizing title of the podcast. But thank you. How has your time been in California?
yeah, good. We're just here to kind of figure out potentially like developing another base. So my partner's from here, so he was born here. But I'm also exploring a little bit around and yeah, we've got a European trip planned and also all over the place, as I said.
Amazing. Is
So
that is it
that
quite
is
hard to
us.
sync up with work stuff, or is it just that you found a way to make it work now?
No, it works perfectly fine. All of my work is online, and with the time zones, most people, it's very easy to accommodate. So yeah, people all over the place. It kind of doesn't matter. Actually, Bali's probably the worst place to be. So it was way better if I'm in the States or in.
I hear it's a very affordable place to live, though, Bali. It's one of the most affordable places to live, isn't it?
Not anymore. Everyone assumes that, but certainly not anymore, especially post-COVID. I
Mm,
think they're really trying to claw back on what was lost
mm,
and prices are hiking. Like I can live for cheaper in Europe. I spend
mm,
more on food in Bali than anywhere else.
mm.
Things. It's a great place to stay, but we were mostly just there because we met there, and visa wise, it's the easiest place. Him being from the States, me being from the UK, it's the easiest place just to figure things out and stay there for a while. So that's kind of why we end up there.
Thank you for giving up your precious time today. I do really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of your work and the real nuance and sincerity that comes across in your posts as well, because I feel like quite a lot gets lost in the social media space in general. But this kind of new wave, I think, I mean, I can only speak for myself, is when I got into coaching and working with people, it was very much the humanistic elements of that. And it was always human client centered. And I feel like more recent years we've deviated away from that a little bit, and yours comes across as very thoughtful, very considered, and obviously the broader societal impacts and the constructs of our mind around aesthetics, because I gather you've been around in the fitness industry for a long time, and I had hoped we were coming more full circle, and I sometimes wonder whether we are making progress or maybe just my echo chambers changed quite a lot.
I do think things are shifting in that there is an increased recognition for the connection between the mind and the body, for the importance of things like body image and compassion. These probably have been constructs that haven't really been considered in the fitness industry because we didn't see the relevance of these psychological constructs when it comes to our eating or movement behaviors. And now I'm seeing a lot more talk around that. And as you say, much of the marketing in the past has been geared towards helping people to under the pretenses that our lives will change, we'll be happy, confident, or whatever.
Mm.
And there is of course still a lot of that, but I am seeing a lot more of the promotion of healthful eating behaviors and movement for the sake of improving your well-being. That's valuable in and of itself. And then the speak around some of these harms when we are too focused on how we look. I'm also seeing more talk around how to help people who do experience a lot of self-criticism, because we're more aware now of the associations between self-criticism, feeling guilt and shame around our eating behaviors and our movement behaviors, and how we are struggling with that, because that can be a real obstacle for achieving like the healthy lifestyle that most people desire. So I am cautiously optimistic, but I do think things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, hopefully. We are, I think the fitness industry is still quite in its infancy. So I think often when I speak to people about it now, and I'm asked about frustrations, I think we all have frustrations, but I think, it's the best time to get into the fitness industry, because you have this wealth of experience, you have this breadth of expertise in that you do have specialist eating disorders, you do have people, as you say, talking about compassion, values, and with other important aspects. And it's not just solely aesthetics, because the diet culture and aesthetics message is something we've been exposed to since we were teeny tiny, all part of that programming, I guess. Which, the really interesting point you mentioned there was, we're in this business almost to encourage these health-seeking behaviours, but I'm always caught up between the intent and the behaviour, and the differentiator being there. Is this an act of empowerment or imprisonment? And I'd be really interested where your own personal journey of that came from. Like when you started, I guess, exercising yourself, like what was the main focus of it? And perhaps was this something you always acknowledged, or was it something that kind of was highlighted to you later on?
I think I was one of the fortunate ones in that I had a really positive introduction to movement through my mum, who is a personal trainer. And I always saw her as someone who's very strong. You know, she was very muscular for a woman, was always complimented on her strength. She sort of really enjoyed movement and training for the benefits beyond just aesthetics, even if they, you know, maybe that's appreciated. But I think I had a really helpful introduction to that because I always saw physical training as an act of like self-care, and developing strength was one of my primary sort of reasons. I do have my own experience with appearance concerns, though, in that as a teenager growing up, I had acne prone skin. And I didn't even draw the connection between that and that being a body image concern, in the way that I was sort of anxious that my makeup would smudge, or that people were looking at my skin rather than talking to me. I felt self-conscious. If I was having a particularly problematic skin day, I wouldn't want to like go out and be as visible. And that is exactly how any body image concern can manifest, whether it's with your skin or with your body weight and size. So I can definitely relate to the experience of being self-conscious and insecure about your appearance. And for me, I got into the body image work when I was coaching people, because I recognized that dietary restraints, the difference between flexible and rigid restraint wasn't that clear cut. And I started probably where a lot of other nutrition coaches do, with flexible dieting, and that being like the panacea for achieving balance and getting a great physique, right? And I remember working with one client in particular who was physically active. She was a power lifter. She was relatively physically healthy and had a desire to drop a few pounds. Like it wasn't even a significant amount of weight. And she was experiencing so much frustration over her inability to stick to her macro goals, particularly on the weekend when she wanted to socialize like a normal person. And we were putting out all the tricks with the macro hoarding and, you know, banking your calories for the weekend and choosing the low calorie options and all the rest of it, to no avail, because it wasn't really the strategy that she needed, and it didn't solve the root of the issue, which now I know was more so around body image than it was about what we were doing with her diet. And that's when I really got interested in the research and began to incorporate the interventions into my coaching approach. And since then, like the types of changes my clients experience and the feedback that I receive is so much more powerful than simply, I got to my goal, yay, bye, right? And I'm like, I'm not really doing much here. And I don't know what it was, but I got to thinking and I was like, imagine if I had like grandchildren one day and they were like, Mummy, what did you do with your life? And I was like, I helped relatively fit people shed a few pounds. Like, do you know what I mean? I was like, that's not really what I want to spend my life doing. And I also remember when I started to introduce the body image work, I had one particular client who he had come from another coaching approach, had developed sort of an unhealthy relationship with exercise, where he was really overdoing it and so fearful of fat gain, but also wanting to build muscle and feeling very, very stuck. And we did some work around his relationship with food, his relationship with exercise, and inevitably his relationship with himself. And we recorded a podcast episode about his experience. And I got a message from his dad saying, Thank you so much for the work that you did together, because I never thought I would hear those words coming out of my son's mouth in relation to how he felt about his body. And I was like, wow, like his own dad is messaging me to
Mm.
say thank you, that he's grateful for the changes that his son has been through. I was like, there's so much power in this work that it really genuinely can change people's lives. And that sounds like a bit dramatic, but when you think about how your body image can influence the way that you see yourself, the way that you feel day to day, and the things that you do in relation to those thoughts and feelings, it really does have an impact on so many areas of our life, not only our nutrition and movement, but also our aspirations and the way that we show up in our other relationships, for example. So I sort of really went deep on that and
No,
explored
I
that a lot
appreciate it.
more.
I was nodding my head in agreement all the way along there, because the word that you used, which I straight away popped into my head before you said it, was that shows you the power of it. And I guess that is what I would celebrate as one of the less tangible things, because it seems to be much of what's celebrated is like how much body fat someone lose or how much weight they've lost on a scale. But the fact that that's impacted that gentleman's family around him and that web of influence that we have, and almost that responsibility that we have to not best represent ourselves and talk about ourselves, but how we talk about other people's bodies around our parents, like the influence of social media has on that as well, which we will definitely delve into the influence of social media on there. Because I often wondered, like, what's the, and by the way, just to caveat, everything I'm about to say is I still work with people with aesthetic goals, as I'm sure you do, but it's just, what's the bigger picture here? Are we adding to life, or are we pulling away from life? And what's the net harm and net good? I think with some of the messaging, because I alluded to it a little bit on the message that I sent you, but I wonder whether on some level we're enabling the least healthful aspects of this sometimes, and wondered your thoughts on that.
I think it really is such a challenge to be able to communicate your message in a way that meets people where they're at and empathizes with their struggles. For example, the fact that it is perfectly normal to want to change your body whilst not endorsing appearance ideals. So there is a lot of nuance here, but something I'm very aware of is the fact that if I'm posting on social media, I cannot control who views that content. There are younger people on there who may be more susceptible. That's like a prime time for developing some of these concerns. And there are also people who are currently struggling with disordered eating or body image concerns. And whilst it is true that, for example, you can lose fat in a healthy way, there's only a very small percentage of the population that would benefit from hearing that message at a certain point in time. And if I'm putting that out there, that also means that there's probably a percentage of the population who wouldn't benefit from viewing that message. It's not what they need to hear at the current moment. And yet I don't have any control over who gets to see that. So I think it is a challenge where we don't want to minimize anyone's current concerns by telling them that they shouldn't care and it's not important, but we do want to facilitate more helpful shifts. And I'm kind of the stance where I am quite adamant in the fact that an aesthetic goal won't be a primary focus within the coaching. So I distinguish between people who may want to lose fat. Again, there'll be many mixed motivations. There's always appearance motivations mixed in, but for some people, they will complain that they're not physically comfortable in their body as it is. Their joints hurt, for example, they can't travel freely, whereby a reduction in body fat may enable them to do those things. And it's going to be difficult to achieve those outcomes via any other means. Like if your joints hurt because you're carrying a large amount of weight around, then sometimes reducing that body weight can help with that specific complaint. And for other people, they may have health concerns and so on. So sometimes there are reasons that losing fat may be helpful in those circumstances, but it also is very specific to the individual's context. And I think that in the industry as a whole, it is not uncommon for us to put physical health on a pedestal at the expense of psychological well-being. And there is the argument, well, you know, so and so, they would benefit from losing fat. It's like, but how do you know what that's going to do to their psychological health? Are they in a position to do that in a healthy way that's not going to have a net negative impact? Because when we think about health, it is more than just our physical health, it includes our psychological well-being. And I'm also very aware that many approaches to treating obesity can be very stigmatizing for individuals. So we are faced with this challenge of, how do I help someone improve their physical and psychological well-being in a way that appeals to them without endorsing appearance ideals or weight stigma? And that can be hard,
That,
especially
yeah.
when we're trying to do that through social media.
Mhm. I also think that the discussion that I've had a couple of times is almost this cost of congruence is like I think perhaps 2019 I doubled down a little bit and just refused to use any kind of physical updates. That's not a judgment on anyone else, by the way, how they want to coach. It's just something that filled me with unease. And when, I guess, in the industry that is built off diet culture essentially and capitalism, is that there's a kind of cost to that, professionally. I mean, hopefully, and now I comfortably can say that coming out the other side of that, but initially that there is a cost to that. So I think the conundrum that a lot of people have is sometimes they know better, but doing better is the difficult bit, because people have bills to pay, people have mortgages to pay, etc. So it's conveying that in a helpful way, that which doesn't essentially hit self-destruct on the professional button, if you like, because we can admire certain individuals for being hugely admirable, doing the right thing, but again, they've still got bills to pay.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the challenge because, if we're using, for example, Instagram, that is a photo sharing app which
Mm.
lends itself to posting physique transformations and so on. And I do think we have a duty to responsibly market, which means moving away from those sorts of posts and moving towards other forms of marketing. Like, you can still use social proof, but why not use a client case study, for example, about how one of your clients, they were starting off here where they were struggling with something, they went through this transformation from working with you, and now they're here where they have so much more freedom, flexibility in their life, they're so much more confident in their ability to make mindful food choices in accordance with their desire for being a healthy person, without the guilt and the restriction that comes when you eat foods that you perceive to be bad, for example, right? That's the same effect of a before and after, and potentially more impactful because you're telling the story of a client which other people can relate to. So there are definitely ways to go about it. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who is a sports psychologist, and he mentioned that, because I've kind of always come from the approach of, oh, marketing always feels sleazy and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. And he was saying, well, we have an ethical duty to outmarket the people who are peddling unhelpful and harmful approaches. And that really resonated with me. I'm like, I'm not actually stepping up to my responsibility armed with what I know if I'm not good at communicating that, because of course then someone struggling is going to go for the most appealing option, and if I'm not putting anything out there, it's not going to be me and I'm not going to be able to help anyone.
Mm.
So that really stuck with me. And I do, again, empathize with the challenge of course, there's pressure, on us to pay bills, but also I think for a lot of people attach a sense of like esteem to their coaching business, or for any business owner. So I actually coach coaches as well, and one of the things we often work through is this anxiety around dips in clients, people leaving and so on, and having difficulty attracting new clients. And oftentimes at the root of it, yes, financial concerns are a part of it, but they also recognize, well, if worse came to worse, I'm not going to starve. I can get another job. That's not what I want, but I can deal with the worst case outcome. The most difficult thing is feeling like a failure or feeling like you're not doing a good enough job. That's really what puts the pressure on, I find, for most people. And it can be easier to succumb to the appeal of mentioning physique changes. And this is something that I still see, even with coaches who are like body image informed. They'll position themselves as like a food freedom and fat loss coach. And it's like, now you've just gone from promoting appearance ideals to promising the best of both worlds and still endorsing appearance ideals. And I understand the argument is that, what if I get them in the door and then I can give them what they really need? And it's like, I think that's also problematic in the sense that it's somewhat misleading. And again, fat loss is not a measure of success if your goal is to focus on overall health, because you can lose weight in unhealthy ways,
Mm.
and if your goal is to improve body image, because that can happen independently of body weight changes. And the root of that is reducing someone's overvaluation of weight and shape. So the amount of importance that they place in their body is the core symptomatology of or psychopathology of disordered eating symptomatology. So how can you promise to improve body image and food freedom, because the two go hand in hand, whilst promoting appearance ideal, when the root of it is placing less importance on how you look? Like, those actually just are not compatible. And
Yeah,
that's not me trying
we've
to be
got really.
anti-diet or, you know, like
Mm.
taking too much of a stance. It's like, it's just literally not compatible. So where do we go from there? And I understand the challenges.
Yeah, it's totally contradictory, and I'm glad you kind of brought that out because that's something I kind of feel quite strongly about. Actually, is like this promotion of intuitive eating or body positivity using the same means as perhaps an individual did back in their competing days. Is the vessel of communication is still their body? It's, you are more than your body, but I'm going to use my body to communicate that message, which is super confusing to a consumer because they think, oh well, this individual, and it's much to what you say, is get them in the door, give them a little bit of what they want, and then eventually what they need. But that's quite deceptive. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, we're not ones to decide what people need. It's, I think people come to us at various different points in their journey, and like anything, you can lead a horse to water and all that. And I can possibly speculate. I try not to psychoanalyze anyone, but I do feel through content sometimes, and it may be someone is resorting to using a throwback picture, and they've been of that more body image informed, and you think about the message that they're promoting and how they're conveying that. And I just think it's the problem that coaches have, which they're quite afraid to admit, is that they're going through a lot of their own struggles as well. Because as again, the enablers that we are, is when I came into the industry, it was certainly a bit of monkey see, monkey do. Is I always wanted people to listen to me, but then everyone that I kind of respected and looked a certain way before they had their voices heard. So I followed suit. That's what I did, you know. And I feel like a lot of fitness professionals there, because it's, you mentioned self-esteem as well, which is quite an interesting aspect of this. Can you talk a little bit more around that, please?
I'm actually really glad that you asked this question, because the construct of self-esteem is actually not as clear-cut as what we would imagine. So most people assume that higher self-esteem is better. And that's not actually where what the research points to. There is a lot of disagreement about what a healthy concept of self-esteem actually looks like. And this goes back to the argument where, you know, we don't want to be like totally anti-diet and telling people that they shouldn't like love their bodies. There's also the downside of the body positivity movement, where it seems totally unattainable, you know, to a lot of people. But with self-esteem, the issue is that we can have stable or unstable self-esteem, and that applies to high self-esteem too. You can have high self-esteem where you regard yourself in a positive light, and that can be unstable if your self-esteem is contingent upon achievement, upon financial success,
Mm.
upon how you look. So the argument is that, you know, we shouldn't tell people that there's more important things than how they look. It's okay to take pride in your appearance. I'm like, that's still problematic if it means that your self-esteem is then contingent upon how
Mm.
you look, because appearances change. You are going to age. That is inevitable. your thoughts and feelings around your appearance are not accurate, in the sense that your perception of your body is not necessarily accurate. And you do not need to like how you look in order to treat your body well. So I do have some issues with promoting, it's okay to take a sense of pride in how you look. It's like, it's okay to celebrate your appearance if it's an expression of your personal style, your personality. For example, I have like a bunch of tattoos. That's a way for me to celebrate my appearance in a sense, but it's not under the pretense that that makes me a better person. And that is the issue sometimes with pride, is that there are different kinds of pride as well. You can have authentic or you can have hubristic pride. And if your sense of pride in your appearance makes you feel better than other people, that can be problematic. And that's actually often what I find in the fitness industry, is that you've got young personal trainers who get into the industry because they have a passion for fitness. They want to share that passion, and they place a lot of pride in how they look, which is why it gets flaunted a little bit. And they think, people want to look like this because it makes you feel better than other people. And that's not a healthy sense of self-esteem. A healthy sense of self-esteem is actually what is known as self-acceptance. So this is where we recognize that we all have innate worth as human beings, and we acknowledge the human condition that is, we are all fallible human beings who are constantly changing, constantly in flux, and our worth does not depend on the things that we do. This doesn't mean that you can't celebrate the things that you do, because we can set goals to strive for mastery, achievement, that increase our quality of life. But it's coming from a place of, I don't need to prove myself. I just want to make my life better because I can. So why not? Like, I'm here on this earth. I've got to do something with my time. Why not spend it doing the things that are meaningful to me? Not because I think it makes me more worthy, but because I want to. And that's the difference. So I do have problems with the argument that, we should be able to take pride in our appearance, because I still think there are more helpful approaches. Like, we shouldn't put our worth in our appearance. We can appreciate our bodies and treat them with respect. We can celebrate and express our personal style. And then we can go on to set more meaningful goals that are probably going to increase our quality of life a whole lot more. And that comes through developing self-acceptance, which means, again, that you do not value yourself based on how you look, which is different to the self-esteem argument, which will say, just, value yourself on a range of things, and then
Mm.
it's stable. And it's like, that's not really how it works, and that's not what the research indicates.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I think that's such an incredibly valid point, because I do think that is naturally the assumption, is that people think their appearance is tied up in self-esteem, whereas it creates this culture, and why I keep using the word enablers, is that essentially when your grid is full of you, there is a certain identity locked to that. There is a certain amount of external validation and adoration that comes with that. And when you're used to it, inevitably at some point that fades. Our body, life happens to us. And I think from even a body's capability perspective, if you're a world-class powerlifter and you're subject to a horrendous industry and that puts you out of your sport, you have an identity linked to that. So when we make what our bodies can do and how we make our bodies look, we make it not just one facet of ourselves, but the whole entity of ourselves. That is incredibly concerning, and I don't know whether it's dramatic use of the word, quite dangerous, I think, longer term to our own mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the problem is that most people don't recognize how much of their identity is wrapped up in something until it's taken away from them. And
Mm.
then they're left stuck, not, feeling good about themselves, not really knowing themselves to, how do I exist outside of this thing, like you mentioned with the sport. So I think it's within everyone's interest to proactively develop a sense of self-acceptance, because it doesn't preclude you from striving for your goals. People will say, well, if I, don't put my identity into my athletic pursuits, for example, then I'm not going to go as far. And that's not necessarily the case either, because when we experience setbacks, if our identity is wrapped up in something, that can lead to some very uncomfortable emotions that can be overemphasized and inappropriate in the context, and we often respond to those emotions in self-defeating ways. Whereas if you're a more self-accepting individual, that helps you to recover from setbacks and move through them faster, so you can cultivate a sense of achievement and achieve great things through self-acceptance, because it helps you recover from those setbacks. So I think that that's something that's really important to consider is, where do I place my identity? How much of that is wrapped up in the things that I do? And how can I develop a sense of self outside of those things while still pursuing those goals?
Mm.
And the only context in which that doesn't apply is with these appearance concerns. People will say, well, I'll accept myself when I look a certain way, or I'll work on my body image at the same time as working on my physique goal. And again, that actually cannot coexist, because many of the things we'll do to achieve a physique goal are the total opposite of what we would recommend when it comes to improving your body image. So, for example, one aspect of improving your body image will be to check your appearance less. So if you're pursuing a physique goal, do you think you're going to be more like looking for signs of progress,
Yeah.
more or less? Like those two things are literally not compatible. So again, it's not a case of
Updates with the coach,
being
physique
too
updates with
opinionated. It's just like practically you cannot do the both at the same time.
That's really interesting because I have seen bodybuilding coaches that have claimed to improve people's body image and their relationship with food towards a bodybuilding competition. And exactly as you said, when you're constantly sending in physique updates, you're constantly scrolling Instagram, all of your friends and I guess your social circle are in physique sport as well. It's impossible to escape. I can't objectively, like how I feel about it personally, I can't objectively look at that and understand it really. Can I, if it's not too much of a personal question, I know this will be interpreted exactly how I intended, hopefully, fingers crossed. But I find, because, I'll often talk about body image and body ideals. And I guess when you're communicating this message around body ideals as someone that probably more closely represents a body ideal, do you find you ever get any pushback from that standpoint? Or are there certain patterns of thought or clear distinctions you like to make in the way you communicate that? Because I'm all for championing different shapes and sizes and bodies, and it's not reflective of our capabilities as professionals, certainly not. But I do find that there's almost this belief that there's more validity in someone that maybe isn't closer to that body ideal talking about these issues, and that sometimes the viewpoint is that people that are closer to that body ideal should just shut their mouths and keep their opinions to themselves because they don't understand the plight.
This is such a great question, and something that I have given a lot of thought to, because I do exist in a socially desirable body in the sense that I conform to the muscular and lean ideal, right? That's just where my body falls as a result of my lifestyle choices. And that's subject to change, by the way. I haven't received pushback for that recently, because you can't really tell from my Instagram that I do live in a socially desirable body. And that's not through a case of avoiding my body, because that's also the argument. It's like, well, all bodies deserve respect. I should be able to show how I look. It's just a case I'm usually clothed. If I'm talking to the camera, I have clothes on, and you can't really, like, my appearance is not a
That's
primary
strange.
focus.
What an Instagram.
Funnily enough. So the reason that I've given this some thought is because I have received pushback in the past where I used a photo of me where you could see my abs in the photo on an advertisement for a webinar series about body image, which upon reflection was not a wise choice from my part. I rationalized it in my head and that I didn't think the photo was that impressive anyway. I was like, well, and it was like one of the only ones I had. But that's not an excuse for for being irresponsible with your marketing. And I think that's probably part of the reason that I am quite conscious of that now. I received an email from someone. It was just, I can't remember what it said exactly, but something along the lines of, this isn't helpful and it makes me feel bad about myself. Why are you using your body on a body image? And I was like, oh shit, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. I just wasn't really thinking. And the webinar was geared towards coaches. And in my head, I'm like, well, coaches don't have body image issues, like they're the ones helping their clients. And of course that was naive of me to think that as well. So I've had pushback in the past from that, but nowadays I don't get so much because I'm more responsible with my marketing. But also, one important point and this is something that I fall prey to, is that I try to display a diverse range of body sizes in my content where I can. Stock photos are very limited, so it's actually challenging to do in a way that's not like quite stigmatizing, in that if you
Mm,
do search fat person on Canva, for example, a lot of the images of people are like distressed. I'm like, well, that's very like
yeah.
stigmatizing. Why can't I just have normal, pictures? Um, but one thing that I am conscious of is that I don't exclude lean bodies. The reason being, as we mentioned, that body image is largely due to our perception, and you can conform to an ideal and still experience body image issues if your investment in your appearance is very high. So actually, if I'm not displaying the full diversity of body sizes, which includes lean people, I'm probably excluding the people who are currently struggling with, although they may feel fluctuating levels of satisfaction with their bodies, they still struggle with the rigidity, with the food preoccupation, with the self-consciousness around other people who inevitably are bigger and leaner, depending on who you surround yourself with, there's always that possibility. And these people can experience great anxiety around sticking to their routine because they have attached a lot of worth to it, that they now can't possibly afford to lose that lean body. So I think that argument, what do you know if you're in a lean body, that's actually misinformed, because that assumes that you can't have body image issues if you're in a lean body, which is not the case. The one thing that I will not have lived experience of is weight stigma, and that comes with living in a large body for a lot of people. And that's something that I want to acknowledge and I want to speak to, and something that I've helped people through, like clients who've experienced that. So that would be the only difference. I can speak to body image concerns because that can affect anybody. And that doesn't matter if you're lean, doesn't matter if you're in a larger body. The one thing that that does differ is the degree of reinforcement that someone experiences, like positive reinforcement, and the degree of weight stigma. So that's the only difference. And I think if you can speak openly about all of these concerns, acknowledge your lived experience and the limitations of that, there's no need to hide your body, but there's no need to flaunt it and use it to sell your services. And there's no need to exclude lean bodies as well. I think we should just aim for diversity, which does mean skinny people, fat people, lean people, muscular people, people with less muscle, like all body sizes.
Mm.
But of course, weight stigma is usually only affecting those who are living in larger bodies, because that reflects the cultural narratives around what's acceptable and what's, attractive.
Yeah, and arguably that's true equity. That's cute. That's literal diversity, not just selective. I think, which
Yeah.
is so important, because I often find maybe more from a male perspective, maybe I need to diversify my people I follow, but I think as a man, because it is something, and get your opinions on it actually, is like something that's classed more as effeminate in air quotations, that only people watching this will see. Because I wondered your thoughts. This is purely speculative. I have no evidence to back this, but even when I look at kind of body image research around men, although there is that much more, out there at the moment. I just wonder how much more or less forthcoming I suspect men can be, because it is classed as something typically female. It is, same as eating disorders, typically classed as thin, white, middle class women, which is, we know that's not true. As much to what you just said, is we know that when we talk about body image, it doesn't look a certain way. Mental illness and mental disorders don't look a certain way. When it comes to body image concerns, is men worry about their appearance as well, but they probably won't be as vocal about that. I don't think, because I don't think that's as publicly celebrated or accepted as perhaps it is with the women's narrative.
Yeah, historically, eating disorders, body concerns have been viewed as a female only problem, which we now know is certainly not the case, in that rates of disordered eating disorders amongst men are rising. And we do find that men typically present to treatment later on in the trajectory of their illness due to the stigma around reaching out for help. I think that's in part due to the belief that food concerns and body concerns are female only and that they shouldn't struggle, but also general stigma around seeking help in general for men. You know, asking for help is a sign of weakness. And if you conform to the masculine ideal, that involves not mentioning struggle, that involves dealing with things by yourself, you know, and that applies to any mental health concern. So I think it's particularly problematic in the food and body concern space due to that additional layer of, well, this is a feminine issue and men don't
Mm.
struggle with this, which is totally not the case. So that is concerning that fewer men seek help. And when they do, it's not at the early stages, it's later on when they're really struggling and it can be very challenging to change. So I do think that we need more awareness around these issues. We need more male figures talking about this. Again, I can talk about male concerns, but that's also the limitations of my lived experience. I will never know what it's like to be a man. Doesn't mean that I can't educate, doesn't mean that I can't raise
Mm.
awareness. It doesn't mean that I can't provide a platform for other men to speak about their lived experiences. But it is true that I will never have the experience of the pressure to be masculine because I am not a man. So I think, again, this on the topic of like diversity, this also applies to having different voices and hearing from different voices and having space for everyone to be able to contribute. And we are seeing more research now exploring men's experiences and things like muscle dysmorphia. You know, that's a newer diagnoses that is being explored, particularly around the prevalence of steroid usage as well, which is, again, women can use these drugs as well, but which disproportionately affect men. So I think there are nuances in the way that these concerns are expressed in the behaviors that we may engage in, where men are more concerned about becoming bigger and leaner, and the behaviors would be more so around dysfunctional attitudes to exercise as well, more so than just the eating. So feeling the need to train often, again, the rigidity around training, not getting the pump in, you know, all these sorts of things, which are less frequent in women. So that's something to be aware of, is like the nuances in how these concerns are expressed, but the way that they're developed is very similar in that it's pressure, you know, from culture, pressure from our interpersonal experiences. In men, it's likely due to the discrepancy between their perceived levels of masculinity and the internalization of the masculine ideal. So this varies across cultures as well, so there's so much to sort of take into account, but it does really seem to be about the whole idea of masculinity, how much you buy into that, and how you perceive yourself to be in relation to that ideal. And when there's a large discrepancy, that can often motivate a lot of these eating and training related behaviors in an attempt to be perceived as masculine. And that's obviously a little bit different to the experience of women.
Mm. Yeah, because it's, as you say, lived experience is such an important part of that. And whilst I might reference something like self-objectification theory, which interestingly, something else I want to get your thoughts out of, because that emerged out of feminist research, is my understanding about the difference between how men are typically brought, or boys are typically brought up, and women are typically brought up. But I found like the counter to almost the objectification of women has become the objectification of men, instead of actually acknowledging maybe objectification is just the issue, and that we're a little bit more than our bodies. Have you seen that the last decade a little bit more? Because I find it's interesting, the narratives around it, because it's become more of a empowerment message for women, but within that is the objectification of men, and men just continue to objectify women. So actually, no progress has been made. That's just my opinion, of course. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is really challenging because I think a lot of the research into body image theories, as you said, has come from feminist perspectives and has reflected, you know, the way that women have typically been treated. But we're also seeing the increased sexualization of men as well. When you think about physiques that are displayed on magazine covers, when you think about like cultural commentary on things like the dad bod, so men are also objectified for their appearance. So it's difficult to be able to speak to all of these experiences without negating someone else's experience. So we talk about the disproportion in that women typically still do experience greater dissatisfaction than males do, but then that's often interpreted as either men don't have problems, or the men that know that they experienced that themselves, they feel marginalized and not included. And we've seen that in the research where males have been underrepresented historically. So there are a lot of challenges, and I think that really does reflect the fact that scientists and researchers are also humans and also a product of their environment. So really remaining non-biased is an active effort, because we all are subject to these experiences and these influences. So like you say, it's important to be able to talk about these theories as they apply to everyone, and where they may apply and where they may not apply. But ultimately, the aim here is to help everyone to feel more comfortable in their bodies, to respect their bodies more, and to place less worth in how they look. And I think doing that, from a single platform can be very challenging. And the way that we talk about these things is also really challenging. So I think that's something that holds a lot of people back, is like, I don't know the right thing to say. And unfortunately, I think that can be limiting, in that it's okay if you say the wrong thing as well. You can say something that's unhelpful, or something that's a little bit inaccurate, and hold space for these disagreements and be able to learn from mistakes and all these sorts of things as well. So I do think that it takes a bit of courage and, again, self-acceptance on everyone who's involved in the conversation, knowing that we're working towards a similar aim. So that was a bit of a tangent, but I also think it's really relevant to being able to discuss these issues.
Yeah, I agree. I often think that I think I've probably said it on every single podcast now, but we all know that social media is a terrible place for any kind of debate. But part of that is met with maybe ego sometimes, in that if you are as open to debate as possible, is that if someone has a counter narrative or some other interesting points to bring to the parties, it should be that, oh wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Maybe I'll change my beliefs around that. And I think I like to think the silent majority are like that. It's just we don't often get exposed to those messages. We hear about the loudest polarized often, because there is that's incentivized at the moment. I think that social currency, that promise at going viral, blue ticks, etc., is to be cruel, callous, unkind, polarized is socially rewarded. And much like that episode on Black Mirror, it is that's where we're heading, is essentially, having a certain number of followers gives you access to lots. So again, why would people change their tune? And it's that cost of congruence, what helps you sleep at night, is a way I like to frame it, because it is quite easy to become despondent and disappointed when you feel you have something valuable to say that is really helpful to people. Because the complexities involved in a lot of these issues is, you can't reduce it to a 15-second reel. That's why I enjoy longer form content like podcasting or writing so much, because they do take some exploration, and we do get things wrong, and we're all constantly learning. Like it's okay to fall on your face, say sorry, and move on. But the nature of things doesn't operate in that way. It doesn't seem.
Something I've had to learn is that I will not be able to help everyone. So it doesn't matter if I don't have the largest platform, if I don't have the loudest voice, because I know that what I do say is going to impact a select few. And that's enough, because like we've spoken about before with the ripple effect. And I was actually speaking to Dr. Philippa Diedrichs, who is on the editorial board of the Body Image Journal. She's developed the Body Project, or what did a lot of work around the Body Project. She was giving me some advice around this, where she was saying, it's not really your job or duty to
Mm.
try to convince everyone, particularly those who are very bought into the idea of achieving the ideal body. Your efforts are best placed helping people who are somewhat more open, because that's how a movement occurs, like a social movement occurs through those ripple effects, and gaining that momentum where you help people who are open to to receiving that help, they see the impact, they're then advocates for the work, they tell other people, they help other people, and it grows that way. And slowly, like, the fringes of your circle of influence can expand because you've helped the people that were more receptive to that help. That makes more sense to place your efforts there. And that's like an uncomfortable truth to accept, you know, that, okay, actually, although there are people who would greatly benefit from this help, again, there's autonomy. Like, it's not my job to try and save everyone. I'm there to help people who want to overcome these concerns. And that's at least where it's got to start. And I think that is what we've seen a little bit with the movement in the industry. You know, we see more talk around values, we see more talk around body image and compassion, all these things. And those were typically topics that were ignored or dismissed. So we're slowly seeing that momentum build, and that's how people are going to come around to these ideas. Like, that's how you'll reach the people on the fringes, by starting with the people who want the help but just don't know what to do. You know,
Mm.
that's probably where our efforts are best placed, whilst, as we said, keeping the conversation open.
Yeah, that acceptance, practicing that acceptance and being at ease with your own message, I think is the only way it can kind of work for me. I think now, I say that I still get despondent, I think naturally, but that is because I think that's just the nature of it. Is that, as you say,
Yeah,
you
because you
can't help.
care.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. And
yeah,
I
it's
think,
frustrating. And it's, you
mm,
know, it's, for me, the most frustrating thing is that it doesn't have to be this way. You know,
mm,
so like, the fact that people struggle for so long and to a significant extent, I'm like, it's just a shame. That's
mm,
why I feel passionate about it, because there are alternatives out there, and
yeah,
we do have methods that are effective. I'm not saying it's 100% effective and that everyone, you know, will achieve the same extent of change, but everyone can improve from where they currently are. And that's something that, you know, I wish people knew, and partly why I get passionate about it. And I would imagine it's a similar thing for you too.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, back to what I mentioned in the first instance, that humanistic element and actually being not even client centered, just human focused, and actually understanding the human experience behind this, that it is multifaceted. There are many aspects that make us who we are. And I don't know, I just, perhaps it's that how I feel my, when I say my evolution of coaching, I certainly not a slight on anyone else, but I do feel like the exercise nutrition side for a lot of people, especially when you refer to working on your relationship with yourself, it is scratching the surface. It is not the deeper work that a lot of people need. They might not recognize that now, but you know, eventually it is that self-leadership towards autonomy. Because if you want a better relationship with those around you, essentially that comes from having a better relationship with yourself. And not necessarily saying that you never have bad body image days, but almost we're working, hopefully working to a place of indifference where worrying about it doesn't get in the way of you actually living the fullest life you possibly can. Because I think the other misconception a lot of people have is that by improving their body image, that means every single day they experience positive and they never have a bad day again. Which I don't know whether you encounter that, but it's almost like, well, I don't love myself every single day and every single moment of every single day, which is often what the body positive narrative is. Whether that's true or not, it is another issue. But I think, yeah, that's what ultimately why people are confused, is because they're in this, they're not happy with their body. They perhaps go on a transformation of sorts, which promises to fix their mental health as well as everything that's physically, in air quotations, wrong with them, and improve their self-esteem. And then they get there closer to that body ideal or closer to that goalpost. They decide they want to move it and notice actually their feelings about themselves haven't changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really is important to display a realistic view of what it means to have a positive body image, which, as you say, is not about loving every single part of yourself or feeling great every day. It's actually about having the tools to not let those feelings of dissatisfaction or the thoughts that you have about your body to interfere with the way that you treat yourself or the way that you show up in your life. And that's part of the work of developing a positive body image, is learning how to manage these emotional experiences and how to detach from some of these thoughts while seeking to develop respect and appreciation for your body. So it's important to understand that you can dislike how your body looks and still appreciate what it does for you. So I might not like the fact that I don't have a six-pack abs, right? That I've got body fat around my stomach. And yet I can still appreciate the fact that my body allows me to carry children, or it digests my food on a daily basis and functions to keep me alive. Like, these are things that we can be grateful for and appreciative of, even when we don't like how we
Mm,
look physically. And that's an important distinction. So understanding that negative body image and positive body image are separate constructs, and that they can coexist in certain ways, and then having a realistic overview of what it means to have a positive body image, which, like we said, is not loving every part or always feeling great, but actually just not letting that interfere with your day-to-day life. And on the whole, you'll probably find you're more satisfied. But the goal is, as we say, to treat ourselves with respect. And that doesn't mean that we can't um get any like positive emotions out of our appearance, so like we discussed the expression of personal style, and the tending to our appearance, but also like celebrating your body and celebrating what it does means engaging in self-care, so treating it well. And if you think about it, we don't take care of the things that we don't like. So when we develop a sense of appreciation for ourselves, that actually helps us to engage in health-seeking behaviors, because we want the best for ourselves. We want to treat our bodies well. And inevitably, that is reflected in our dietary choices and the way that we move our bodies. And it can go from being inactive to moving more. It can go from having a very rigid relationship with exercise to being more flexible and allowing yourself to enjoy movement, not just doing things because that's how, you need to do those things to grow muscle.
mm.
So something that a lot of clients experienced is they have a desire and a pull to explore other sports, but they're so hung up on weightlifting a certain number of times per week that it's all they have time for. And they're concerned that if they do jiu-jitsu, that's going to interfere with their muscle growth. So they're at a conflict there. And so really it's about getting more in touch with yourself and appreciating yourself and respecting yourself and valuing yourself outside of how you look, so that you're able to meet your needs and care for yourself in a way that makes your life better, not consumes your life.
Yeah, I think in our haste to pathologize everything these days, as well as we've almost forgotten that there is a regular, normal level of body dissatisfaction that everyone experiences at some point. To which extreme is
And it
if
doesn't have to be a problem,
yeah,
you know?
it doesn't have to be an injury. I can't believe we haven't got onto jiu-jitsu, and I'm so conscious of your time as well, your valuable time. I feel like I could speak to you for ages, but I'm not, because I'm very appreciative, and you've probably got lots else to do. But just before we wrap up, where can people go? I'm thinking from a coaching professional CPD perspective, and also clients, obviously, where's the best place for people to find you?
So all of my information is over at my website, which is coachshannonbeer.com. And that's the same as my Instagram handle, so Coach Shannon Beer. And I also have a podcast myself called Consilience, which I know is not the easiest thing to search for, but I'm adamant that I want to keep the name because of what it
No,
represents.
I've listened to a good few episodes. I appreciate it. I didn't really think the name of my podcast through either, but I'm stubborn as well. Don't worry.
I'm like, people will learn what Consilience means. It's
Well, everyone
okay.
will move around me. Everyone will play ball with me. Thank you so
Yeah, so those are
much.
probably the best places.
I really appreciate you, and I think there's so much value to be taken out of that. I just wanted to chat to you anyway, and I'm always concerned with this, and I think just the nature of what we do professionally is that we go onto podcasts, and it's always about must deliver value, and of course there's tons of value there, but also get to know about some of your personal experiences and your personal opinions on things, and not just professionally what people are about. Much to that, getting caught up in an identity, I think, in our line of work, is people can get tied into that. I am a coach, I am a personal trainer, I am a CrossFit athlete, and we're so much more than that. So I really appreciate you. Thank you again so much for your time. For everyone else, if you have given this a listen, please do share it with another. Maybe give us a rating, because it's the only way it hits any other ear holes. Until next time, thank you.